dive deep into these ELASTOS connections. So what I did first is I went on and had a look at Feng Hang, his Twitter, because sometimes you find really good information with regard to who they are talking to and their movements as they interact in business. Some of the really important ones that in terms of relationships were John McAfee, Roger Ver, Ji Han Wu, and Da Hongfei. All four of these guys are in direct connections with Feng Han. Remember, he's linked to Tencent, and he is one of the co-founders of ELASTOS and an angel investor. So given that, what is really interesting is these guys, Ji Han Wu, McAfee, and Roger Ver, they are all very vocal proponents of Bitcoin Cash. So that's just something that we need to be aware of, because ELASTOS is going to house 50% of the mining power of the future once this is going. So what does that actually mean? We need to unpack that and explore that, but we can't deny these connections. They are real, and it's worth us knowing as investors in the overall cryptocurrency market, because that's where these connections come in, not so much at the blockchain, but at the cryptocurrency level. Then there's some other business connections. We are talking, as you can see from the other pictures, we're talking the Bitcoin Embassy, we're talking the R3, and I'll explain that in a moment, and we're talking about Microsoft. Those pictures, and one more, a massive one, if you look at the top next to the McAfee picture, is a personal ID system that the ELASTOS team are working on directly with central banks in China. So this is where it gets interesting. If you look at R3 in the picture, R3 is a huge consortium. It is specifically for banking, and they are an R3 group predominantly in the West, and we're talking billions of dollars between them. As one example of that is JP Morgan. I think that's the name of the company. But that group, that whole consortium group, is a very valuable, a very powerful banking consortium. And they met up with ELASTOS. And the reason why that piqued my interest is because, again, you can see evidence that there's banking communications happening with ELASTOS. And one step further than that, R3 is a direct link to Hyperledger, and Hyperledger underpinning that is IBM. So given that, there's another correlation with IBM, and as I explained before, there's already absolute connections with Onchain and Hyperledger, because Onchain is one of the not a premium lender, but they are one of the members of the Hyperledger network. So one more thing to add too is that because R3 is so focused on banking, it makes a lot of sense when you move up to the top picture, which is about Stellar. So money could move like email. Now that is one of the best little graphics I could find on the internet for you, because that clue of email is so much more significant than I can express. Stellar and ELASTOS have been working for 5 years on a payment rail system, a peer-to-peer system. And recently, Alibaba, and I'm going to show you all this evidence, this is really important, Alibaba was working with Onchain, with LawChain actually. Alibaba was working directly with LawChain, which is an absolute child chain of Onchain, to work through an email system. What they haven't told you is that that email system is directly related to finance. And this is why it's important. Stellar and ELASTOS, in consultation with NEO, have been going and consulting with banks. They've been working out how to establish a payment rail system using things like email. And that literally is relevant because of ELASTOS's capacity to be a very powerful operating system in utilizing cloud technology, but not on the blockchain. So what's coming with the Stellar connection is absolutely exciting, and it's worth looking more into, but I'm certain that it's much more to do with this than, well, I'm certain it's more to do with those interconnections of peer-to-peer networking, because Chen has already explained that, than it is just about the speed of Stellar. And the reason why is because the speed of Stellar as a blockchain was comparable already to the NEO and on-chain protocols. They were already able to do 1,000 transactions per second, and they were moving towards 10,000, which they're working on now. So we move across to the next ones. These are some slides I got, and I'm going to give you the link. The person who made this was absolutely freaking awesome. But they provide you with key facts that make it more likely that we are moving into an area of AI, of artificial intelligence. We are moving into a very, very cloud technology focused internet environment, whereby these companies are investing all of these billions of dollars, or well, in one case Alibaba and Tencent certainly are, so that they don't lose that market share. And if you look carefully, again, what's another interesting fact, considering we talked about Chen Rong's focus on Android, is that Android is the predominant device used in the mobile network. And in fact, 9 out of 10 smartphone brands in China are Android based. Some other interesting facts, Baidu, which is part of that BAT group, Baidu is the primary search function in China. And then if you look across the populations, we're talking about 1.3 billion people of the planet are located in China in comparison to 323 million in the US. So given all these facts, it's starting to I'm trying to bring together the correlations between ELASTOS and how relevant the internet's going to be, not just in China, but at the very least, we can see the magnitude just in one country. And then AI. AI is a huge investment that Baidu are making. I'm going to show you more evidence of some of the things they're doing. And then if we go across to WeChat, things like this are really relevant because their potential in terms of that payment rail I was talking about via email system, via a peer-to-peer network structure, are very plausible. And WeChat is the predominant means of the predominant app in terms of communication in China, and it far exceeds things like Alipay, even that QQ, for example. And they are working on having some sort of means of payment as well. So WeChat is essentially things like this. WeChat is Facebook, WhatsApp, Tinder, PayPal, and Slack combined in China. So it's just important we know some of this stuff. So let's have a look at some of the other information and go from there. Sorry, I'm not sure why it's not moving across. Okay, so just to really provide you with some evidence as well, here you can see that ELASTOS was launched, as I said before, by Ron Cheng, Jihan Wu, and Fen Han. And I wanted to put this directly in there to support what I was saying, and I put the source in so that you know for sure that Jihan Wu was involved, and he is, again, he's a representative of Bitcoin Cash, you know, he's an advocate for that, but he's also a miner. So he represents fundamentally number one thing, and that's mining. And we know why he would support ELASTOS now, because of the capacity for ELASTOS to support so much of the market, of the mining market, once it gets going. And Fen Han, we know, is connected to Tencent, which feeds all the way down through into ELASTOS. So that's really cool. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about was, I'll briefly touch on some of the key points from Neo News today. Actually, we talked about those things already. I guess I'll just mention here, because I want to get straight into some of the ELASTOS stuff, is that if you want to know more about the ELASTOS meetup, and you want to know more about the rundown, check it out on Neo News today. They had an excellent article where it reviewed the entire thing, almost literally, verbatim. So it was really great, and there's just some key points that I took out of that. So let's get stuck in again, focused on ELASTOS, but in the context now of Onchain, Alibaba, Neo, and LawChain, because they all interrelate. So if you want to know more about the question marks of Alibaba, this article explained that the Ali Cloud is Alibaba's cloud computing branch. And it explains that it is ranked first in China and for cloud infrastructure services, and 6th in the world. So it's a very significant player in the cloud technology market. And as I said before, ELASTOS is all about cloud technology. So it says here that the Neo's much talked about cooperation is actually with the Ali Cloud's email department. Now, what's interesting is that the real correlation was actually with LawChain. And if we go up to the quote at the top from Da Hongfei, let's listen to what he had to say. He says, the LawChain, using AntShares-derived technologies, is now operating stably and swiftly expanding into multiple areas. AntShares technology can be applied to multiple areas, and the LawChain is just another example of our fast deployment of the on-chain universal framework. So what we know for sure is that there's a child network, there's a child blockchain called LawChain or Legal Chain, and that's all outlined in their white paper, in the Onchain white paper. And we know that they're directly correlated with Onchain. We know Onchain is a private entity. We know that it can't survive without Neo. So the next thing is that if you look at the next quote by Da, it says this: the Ali Cloud, as the tech core of the Alibaba group, has come to recognize our technical competence as well as the potential of the blockchain technology as a whole. We expect a lot of companies to follow suit. So what Da's really explaining here, and all of this information is accurate, is that the email system that they've been working on, they've been using the LawChain system to do these explorations of email potential. And as I said, that relates directly with Stellar, because Stellar is looking at having sort of a peer-to-peer financial rail system working with ELASTOS. So very soon you're going to see that interrelationship and that correlation with NEO. And that's important because that's why all of these titles of Onchain, Alibaba, NEO and LawChain all interrelate, they all interconnect, and there's obviously one more that's not on there, and that's ontology, which wasn't existent when this article was written. So let's talk about Alibaba and the Ali Cloud in the context of articles that have been released. So more confirmations that Onchain was the framework that was provided for the Alibaba blockchain powered email evidence repository. So guys, the thing to remember here is that what it states essentially is that Alibaba Cloud uses LawChain, a consortium chain or a private chain, and that LawChain is directly linked with Onchain. Through the technology, though the technology is from Onchain's technology, LawChain remains a different entity. So it does not constitute an Alibaba on-chain cooperation, the company clarified. Well, what we know now, because this article was written last year in October, we know for sure now that LawChain, as Da Hongfei has stated, is a child chain of Onchain. So there is a direct correlation, there's no question of that. And given that LawChain was utilizing Alibaba, given that it's related to Onchain, given that Onchain directly supports NEO through NEOX, and also by the overall network, indirectly from this, we can argue that Alibaba is involved, but directly, we're going to look further into that as well. So guys, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about was this information about China's most influential projects and people. If you look at the top, Fenbushi is right on the list, and that's important because Fenbushi Capital are the ones behind Onchain. If you're not familiar with Onchain was supported by Factom, and this year, NEO worked with Factom. They work directly to try and work out things related to compliance. And again, compliance and digital signatures and that sort of research they were working on. There's two things happening. They're going to Japan soon to work further with that, looking at companies like CoinFirm and BlockPass. But also, again, compliance relates to ontology specifically because that's an aspect not only of the key, but of ontology's trust system. So that's very fascinating, and if you look further at some of the most influential people, you can see that Da Hongfei is written there, and so is Jihan Wu, and we've talked about those correlations with both of those guys, potentially. Then if you go down the bottom, look at this. Tencent is leading the BAT war, and remember, Fenhang is directly related to them as in a sense, has a role in that pool we were talking about. And they have one of the greatest and most influential portfolios when it comes to products and revenue makeup in China. And then in terms of government, Chinese government is the biggest venture capital firm in the world. The biggest one in the Chinese space at least is Tencent. It is the #1 venture capital in China. And as I said before, it's part of the BAT group, and we can see correlations, which we're going to look at more of them, but already we saw one with Fenhang. And then what is very important to recognize is that China is the world's largest cryptocurrency market, and it is definitely developing its own digital currency. So that's another boon for the future of blockchain, the future of real world contextual currency functionality on the blockchain in the future at the very least. So then the next thing I wanted to talk to you about was this. There was a summit recently, a few months ago, called Shape the Future in Hong Kong. And it was initially meant to be in China. And what I found very interesting is that Fenhang was one of the key speakers, one of the key members by invitation to this event. The majority of the people at this event were actually about Bitcoin and about any interrelated cryptocurrency. And one of them obviously is BCH, or Bitcoin Cash. What I found even more interesting is that the sponsorship relationship and also the speakers. So again, going back to that map that I created, look at this. You've got Jihan Wu, we've got Roger Ver, we've got John McAfee, we've got Fenhang, and we've got Craig Wright. All of those, except for Fenhang, are direct and clear proponents of Bitcoin Cash. And remember, we go to Fenhang now, that he represents ELASTOS, and ELASTOS is going to provide with a significant market shareholding of mining capacity through ELASTOS. So very interesting, very, very interesting. If you look at further into that presentation, the #1 funder of the event was Bitmain. And Bitmain again is Jihan Wu's baby. It's his project. He's the CEO. Then if you go to the golden sponsors, Onchain is there. And Onchain initially was owned by Craig Wright. He sold it to a very successful Canadian entrepreneur. And it's a bit anomalous what they're doing. It's actually very anomalous, but there's no doubt that they are working behind the scenes to do some pretty incredible things with Bitcoin Cash. And again, I'm certainly not suggesting I'm proponents of either of them. I really don't, not. But I'm showing you the evidence is here. ELASTOS also sponsored this event, which is very interesting, and then you can see some other ones as well. Again, I wanted to show you some evidence with relation to Ron Cheng, Jihan Wu, and Feng Huang in terms of launching ELASTOS. That's really important because it just supports, again, those interconnections. And we've talked about some of these things from the Neo news today. So if we go across now to the next point I wanted to talk about, which was the ambitious Alibaba plan. And here you can see a picture, a very important one. You're talking about Jack Ma and the Alibaba, plan. Basically, Alibaba has invested over $1 billion into cloud technology, and they want to be have a mainstay position in internet control and influence. And so by investing in this, if you have a look at the bus as an example, it literally says on this bus, it says Alibaba Cloud, make ready for Hong Kong. So already there's major advertisements, there's major investment happening to get everybody ready for not just Ali Cloud, but for major businesses utilizing cloud technology. So 2 years ago, Alibaba decided to take the cloud part of its business more seriously and expand it with $1 billion investment in Aliyun. Now Aliyun, again, Yun is that buzzword in China for the cloud, and basically in English it's known as the Alibaba Cloud, or Ali Cloud. Alibaba's cloud president Simon Hu made a bold prediction telling Reuters that the goal is to overtake Amazon in 4 years, whether that's in customers, technology, or worldwide scale. So again, here's the big thought. Given that ELASTOS took 17 years to make, given that cloud technology is a prominent thing in the BAT group, particularly in Alibaba and Tencent, the question must be asked, how does this potentially relate to ELASTOS as an operating system? We're seeing so many interconnections from Tencent to Feng Hang to ELASTOS, from Jihan Wu to major players in BCH and also in the Bitcoin group as well. This is really fascinating to me.